Yeah. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good as well. Thanks for taking time and joining for this chat. So
Yeah, thanks for
before we
having
move
me.
on, I would like to request you to introduce yourself, your journey so far, and how that has led to you doing what it is that you are doing right now.
Oh boy, well thanks very much for having me. First of all, my name is Matt Heinz. I run a company called Heinz Marketing. We basically do B2B sales and marketing consulting. So I think of us as sales pipeline people. We help companies build and manage sales pipelines. I've been doing this for a long time. Started this business a little less than 6 years ago, and love it. Just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun working with companies big and small. This is never. It's not rocket science, but it's not easy either. So it's been a fun challenge.
Okay. So you did mention that you work with sales organization and help them manage their pipelines better. So
Mhm.
what are some of the most common mistakes that sales managers do that you've come across?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is, it's amazing to me how many sales managers really don't understand and don't focus on the end result that their team's trying to achieve, right? I think you focus too much on the tactics, too much on the daily, calls and dials and talk time, and not as much on the actual pipeline. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I also think that sales managers aren't always very good at understanding the strengths and weaknesses of their individual salespeople. Different salespeople operate in a different way. They have different things that motivate them, and part of your job as a manager in general, let alone your manager in sales, is to understand what motivates your people, combine that with the objectives they're trying to achieve, and then manage to that.
Okay, so that brings to the question as to what can they do to help the sales executives sell better or achieve their goals.
Well, I think in some cases, so a couple things. One, be very clear about what you expect of them. Be clear about what someone's objective is, what their quota is. Make sure they have the tools and the means to get there. If that means having enough leads for marketing, that's one thing. If it means having enough opportunities, if it means having the content and the tools and the presentation skills, training is a huge part of that as well. I mean, in general, it's making sure that you've got a number and that you're enabling and empowering your sales team to leverage that. Now, you can't pick up the ball and shoot for them, but you got to make sure that they've got everything they need to succeed.
Okay, so I have a very interesting point here. Uh, the way we sell has changed quite a bit. The way
Hmm.
people buy has changed quite a bit as well. So the role of a sales manager has also changed quite a bit. So that brings to the point that what do you think are the KPIs that sales managers should be measured on, based on whatever we just spoke about and whatever you've seen. So what are some of the KPIs that sales managers should actually be measured on?
Well, I think, first and foremost, it's the number, right? I mean, you want to make sure people are actually hitting their number and doing that consistently. I've heard some sales managers talk about the difference between getting it done and doing it right. And I think that that's worth measuring as well. So, if you're hitting your number, that's great. But if you're not doing that the right way, if you're not doing it consistently with your brand and your values, it's a little harder to measure that quantifiably. But I think that you can use examples of how sort of people on a manager's team are executing to make sure that that follows correctly. I think the other thing that's really important to watch for managers is look at the satisfaction rate and the retention rate of their reps. You invest a lot of time as an organization. You invest a lot of hard and soft costs in not only hiring and training but supporting your salespeople. Losing a solid salesperson is a very, very expensive thing. And most people, I think you read this all over the place, most people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So I think it's really important to make sure that you are measuring and rewarding your sales reps based on how well they're retaining their best sales reps.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, there are a couple of other things also that sales manager should be measured on. So, one of the things that I personally believe is that sales manager should not just be measured on a total number that rolls up to them, but on the fact that how many of their sales executives have actually did their numbers. So
Hmm.
that is something that I think, my personal opinion, as to that should be the measure of revenue for a sales manager to be called successful. It also makes sure that sales guys, the managers actually are able to coach their team. They are able to do whatever the mentoring that is required, that is required for them to kind of train their people. But as long as all their sales executives achieve their quota, I think that is where the sales manager success lies. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I think you can have one or two reps that are just killing it, and it can sort of mask. It can mask the fact that other reps aren't. But I also think that you can have a couple reps killing it, and if they're not doing it the right way, and if the managers aren't fostering a productive environment where everyone feels recognized, where everyone feels like they're being supported, that's where you're going to start to lose reps to other companies. That's where you're going to start to see lower satisfaction rates and lower, I think just lower scores from HR perspective. So I think there's a lot of ways to measure that. I do tend to think that the more motivated you have your reps, the more they feel like their managers behind them, the better they're going to deliver on their sales performance as well.
Okay, so there has been a lot of talk around social selling, right? So from a B2B context, what do you think social selling is, and is it relevant from a B2B context?
It's definitely relevant. I think when you hear people talk about social selling, I think they're mostly talking about using social channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatnot, to not only engage with prospects but also to listen for buying signals. I think our prospects are indicating sets of need, indicating certain symptoms and pain points earlier in the buying process than we've had access to before. That's a pretty powerful thing. We could spend a whole half hour, a whole hour just talking about that. I do think, though, that social selling will finally have reached the ideal point of maturity when we stop calling it social selling and just call it selling. The fundamentals behind what people are doing on the social channels, the psychology behind selling has not changed just because we have Twitter and LinkedIn. So I think it's important to make sure you're leveraging the unique attributes of the channels and leverage the information that we have available to us on some of these channels that we haven't had access to before, but also recognize that the way that we build relationships and the way that we're engaging with prospects really doesn't change just because we're using a social channel.
Yeah, and do you also think that primarily the social channels are used for prospecting and kind of adding value to your connections, or is there something else that you can do it beyond these two as well?
Oh, I mean, the social channels can be used at every stage of the process, right? I mean, they can be used just in terms of gathering intelligence about a company or an individual. Maybe you haven't even reached out yet, and you're just learning what they like. You're learning what they like or what they're focused on, both at work as well as what their passions are outside of work. You can use it as a way of reaching out to build some trust and credibility, by liking and retweeting and favoriting and commenting on some of their stuff, so that you build some familiarity before you even reach out. Let's say you qualified a prospect and they're qualified and not ready to buy. You can put them on a drip email campaign, and marketing can put them into your marketing automation systems, and that's all fine and good. But what you can also do is continue to watch them on social and engage with them on social in a one-to-many format. Curate interesting content into your own feeds, and then share and engage with the content of those that you're following. It's a great way to very subtly, with literally just a couple minutes a day, stay in touch with literally thousands of potential prospects. The people in the organizations I see doing this right are generating the majority of their nurtured opportunities, meaning those they've qualified and they're just waiting until they're ready. The majority of those opportunities are coming from their social selling efforts as opposed to any other channel. So I think if you look at every stage of the buying process and every stage of the marketing and sales pipeline, you can find a role for social media to naturally help you engage and create velocity in those relationships.
Interesting. So do you see any organization which is doing it right and seeing a lot of success from a B2B context?
Yeah, I mean, there's. I think I think I see more individuals doing it right than I see organizations. I think the gap that we still have to overcome in B2B is getting sales organizations to have a unified approach that is consistently applied for how social selling works. And there's a handful of very good trainers out there that focus on this entirely, and they're doing some great work. But I think you still, in most organizations, see those individuals that are the early adopters that are doing this. And even if there's a higher penetration rate of social selling practices in an organization, that doesn't mean that there are sort of unified sort of standards or recommendations across the board. I think we're still a little bit behind on that, but we're making progress.
Okay, so we are talking about sales executives actually reaching out to prospects and nurturing them. In a world where sales executives are doing this, they are creating interesting content, and creating personal brands and connections. So, what relevance does marketing still have in this world? And what do
I
they do?
think, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that, they traditionally, marketing has sort of owned, the brand and owned the advertising and owned the lead generation, and then eventually, leads get to a salesperson. Sales really hasn't had any place to play necessarily until those leads come in. Well, now you can have a salesperson build a relationship from day one. Um, there's a lot of different analyst firms that have given different stats and that relate to the percent of time. Their percent of the buying process that is completed by the time buyers engage sellers. I've seen as low as 52%. I've seen as high as 73%. So let's take a middle number. Let's say it's 60, 65%. Well, if 60 to 65% of the buying process is over before the buyer engages a seller, and buyer and seller, let's say salespeople, that means that marketing now owns the majority of the sales process, right? It's not just, hey, we create a bunch of flyers and collateral and we're going to do our advertising and generate our leads and we're done. Marketing now owns the majority of the buyer relationship as it relates to closing the deal. So so I would argue that not only is marketing relevant, marketing is far more relevant and important to managing the sales process than ever before. Marketing will directly lead to higher conversion rates, will directly lead to larger pipelines, as long as the same story that marketing is telling finds its way over to sales, right? And you have to understand now, you're not just pitching products, you're speaking to people and problems. So we talk a lot about sort of this analogy of, you have to sell the hole, not the drill. Every stage of the buying process, you can't sit there and talk forever and ever about your product or service. You have to relate to your buyer and the problems that they have and the needs that they have. People go to a hardware store and they may actually buy a drill, but they don't really need a drill. What they need are holes. They just need the drills in the neighborhood of the hole. Figure out how that works and figure out the stories you could tell, to your prospects all along the process, from that early stage discovering it, the early stage of sort of building awareness, research, the loosening of the status quo, so to speak, all the way through to when someone's ready to buy. There's a huge role for marketing, and I think that role is increasing in importance today.
And how does that actually impact on the way sales and marketing interact with each other? Traditionally, there has always been this tussle between sales and marketing teams as to who owns the pipe, and in terms of the results, right? So that each together. So how does that play out in this new reality?
Yeah, I mean, that still exists. Ultimately, I think sales and marketing should understand that they have different roles, but they need to work together. Some of that just means literally having the same objectives and the same definitions. I mean, if you start with that, you're making good progress, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen a sales team has their quota, they've got their sales goals. And on the other side of the fence, you've got marketing, and marketing says we've got our lead generation goals, and we're supporting sales, and we're working together. I can't tell you how many times the lead generation goal has nothing to do with the sales goal. They literally weren't built together, right? So the lead generation goal might be 10% of what the sales team needs. It might be 4 times what the sales team needs. No one's done that math. And not only has no one done the math, it's not you do the math after. It's like you do the math and then you figure out, based on the number of sales needs to hit, what size of an opportunity pipeline do you need at the beginning of the selling period? How many leads are needed to find a percent of those that are qualified and ready to buy? And that then gives marketing some marching orders in terms of what they're going to go and do and what the scale of that needs to be. So getting to a baseline of sales and marketing alignment is not super complicated, but you still have to do the work, and a lot of organizations still aren't doing that.
So why do you think it's still not happening? What could be the reason for that?
I think it's outside of what those organizations are used to doing. I think so. A couple things. I think there's still plenty of sales and marketing leaders that don't trust each other. I think that even organizations that talk a good game in terms of having the same objectives then go back to their jobs and they do whatever they want to do or do whatever they're used to doing. I think that there aren't always executives above those sales and marketing leaders that are requiring this. I think to do this well, in some cases, it needs executive sponsorship. That collaboration needs to be baked into people's jobs and based into their rewards. So, I hate to, use a stick versus a carrot, but in some cases, you're going to have to change some habits and change some behaviors to get people to actually do the right thing. I think ultimately the people that do this, and ultimately the organizations that drive this kind of alignment, they see better results. The teams are happier. They're not fighting against each other. Therefore, work is more fun. But getting them over that hump sometimes takes a little push.
Yeah. So with so much technology involved in marketing right now, so there is this question about do you need to hire marketing guys who are techies, who understand technology, or do you need to hire techies who understand marketing? What do you think is your thoughts on that?
I've seen it work both ways. I think the rules of marketing have changed so much. I think you don't have to have an MBA to be a marketing superstar these days. I think I've seen lots of what I guess I'd call old school marketers really sort of learn the new ways of marketing and get smart about sales alignment and do really, really well. I've seen people that haven't had any marketing experience but just have the right mindset, just understand that it's a function of supporting the overall sales goal. It doesn't mean you have to be subservient to sales, but it means that you understand your role in driving pipeline for the organization. I do think that marketing is getting more technical, and it's going to continue to get more technical. I don't think that means that I don't think that means that every marketer is going to need to run out and learn how to code. But certainly for a lot of marketing jobs, understanding some basic HTML and some basic code is helpful. I see a lot of CMOs that are starting to find counterparts in their organization. I see a lot of chief marketing technology officers. And I think that it's a little sad if you see that organization. I think someone in marketing needs to be able to understand the technology well enough to leverage it. But anyway, I fundamentally think that the walls have come down in terms of who can actually do marketing well today, and a solid background and education in marketing is great. But I see just as many people doing fantastic work in marketing that are coming from a variety of different backgrounds and disciplines.
Okay, so we spoke about the alignment between sales and marketing and how the goals need to be set right. So do you think the CEO has a role to play there? And you yourself are a CEO of your organization, right? So what kind of role do you play in your organization when it comes to the entire sales teams kind of achieving their numbers? So what role do you envision a CEO to play there?
Well, I think the CEO sets the tone. They set the tone of the organization, not only in terms of sort of overall business and product strategy, but also sort of how the work's going to get done. I think some of that comes down to values and the ways the organization works. Some of it comes down to who you hire and what individual attributes you value and that you hire for and that you reward. If you're rewarding a cutthroat organization that's only focused on results, if you're only focused on get it done versus doing it right, the right kind of sales alignment and marketing alignment probably doesn't stick. On the other side, I think that the organizations that are doing this well, it's mandated and or at least rewarded and encouraged by the executive suite and from the very top to think in terms of one goal, to think in terms of customer alignment as opposed to product and company alignment. So I do think it comes from the top. I mean, for our organization, we're not as big as a lot of our clients, but I think I certainly value not only what it means for me to sort of set the tone and direction for the company, but also to get out of people's way. I think I don't know any CEOs that can effectively micromanage what's going on in the organization and do that successfully. My job is to set some goals for the organization, create some guidelines in terms of how we're going to do that work, and then hire really smart people that can go out and get it done. We've been very, very lucky. That we've been able to grow our business over the last few years. We've been successful financially. We've got some great clients, but we also have some amazing people on staff. I'm just really proud of the team that we have, the decisions they make. We all share a common set of values, and the way that we not only do our own sales and marketing, but also manage our customer relationships is consistent, and that's very important to me.
That's interesting. So when it comes to hiring, so are there any basic set of guidelines that you use when you hire your sales team to get good people? Because I've found that that's been one of the biggest challenges that a lot of organizations face, which is to hire really good sales guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think past experience doesn't really sort of necessarily dictate future performance. I think you really have to be careful at how well someone's done in a past job. I think you need to understand clearly the attributes that you need from successful salespeople in your own organization. What are the skill sets? What are the attributes? What are the personality traits that tend to work really well? I find that reference checks and aptitude tests tend to work better in terms of identifying reps that are going to have the best likelihood of success. If you understand what it takes to be successful in your sales organization, talking to people that have worked with that rep in the past and validating that they have or they don't have some of those attributes. And then there's a variety of very, very good aptitude tests that can actually test people for some of those strengths and weaknesses from a personality and from a value standpoint. I find that those type of tests and those background checks mean a lot more than even what someone does in an interview and what they put on their resume. So ultimately, you're going to look at all of those, but I think it's really, really important to make sure that the makeup of the person that you're hiring matches the kind of sale that you're doing. I've seen that work even to the point where you can have someone that has never been in sales before, but can come in and be a superstar because they have the right characteristics, they have the right attributes, they share the values of your more successful salespeople.
So it's very critical for organizations to actually understand what kind of attributes that you require in selling successfully.
Very true.
Yeah. So I've tried to wrap up now. Since my show is called Pushing Beyond the Obvious, from your experience, I would like to understand what are some of the mistakes that sales leaders do, which are so obvious for someone coming from the outside, yet they kind of miss when they do their regular work.
Yeah, I think too often sales leaders, and I don't know how obvious this is, but too often sales leaders, when reps aren't hitting their number, they look at the process as opposed to the customer. So it's too easy to say, okay, you're not hitting your number. What are you putting in CRM? How many calls are you making? How many activities you have? How many demos are you getting? Those may be the right building blocks mathematically to help you hit your number, but they have nothing to do with the customer. They have nothing to do with the people you're talking to. So if you can better understand where your prospects are coming from, what their needs are, have real conversations about where the breakdown is between what you have to offer and where your customer is, have that kind of qualitative conversation with your reps and train them on how to see some of those things themselves, so that when they get a no from a prospect, that may be a no, I don't have 15 minutes right now, as opposed to a no, I don't need your product or service. Because again, if you're selling a drill and your prospect doesn't understand that what you're selling can help them get a better hole in what they're achieving today, they may be saying no for the wrong reasons. So I think, so long story short, I think customer-centric problem solving for sales managers is a skill that most sales managers don't have. And I think, to me that feels obvious because everything we do is sort of focused around sort of that customer mindset. But so many sales managers just manage to the metrics, they manage to the building blocks and the steps to get there, and that's not always a very good way to sort of predictably get your number.
And I know a lot of sales managers who, if their sales reps are not doing their numbers, the only thing that they do is put more pressure and nothing more. Yeah,
I mean, more pressure without the means to do something about it doesn't mean a whole lot. You can tell me all day long, I need you to hit your number. If I don't know what to do, or if I'm doing the wrong things, I'm going backwards in both cases.
Yeah, I know. So thanks a lot, Matt, for spending this time with me. If you could just let people know where they can connect with you, that would be really.
Our website is just heinzmarketing.com, HEINZ marketing.com. You can check us out on Twitter also at Heinz Marketing. And I really appreciate the time. This has been a lot of fun. And anyone wants to check us out, please do so.
Yeah, and thanks a lot for putting out some really great content. I can also see the app recommendation that you do and the top 10 posts that you do. They're really very, very interesting.
Thanks you very much. Thank you.
Okay.